person that went to school for audio production. It was really fun.
Oh God, you're the hardest to please.
It was
okay,
well, it was really fun for me to just get to see all the analog equipment and all that kind of stuff. But the film itself is kind of interesting in how it kind of celebrates the Italian Gallo films, but in the same sense, it's kind of deconstructing them and showing why they're kind of silly. Can you just kind of
silly? They're not silly.
Well, they're not silly.
No, I know. Yeah. Well, I guess it was showing the way that kind of the mechanics of it, and I love the idea of. I think most of us stab a cabbage every day in the kitchen when we're cooking, but as soon as you have the association of what a stabbing is, it completely changes how you view it. So I guess a lot of the film is about association and I guess soundtracks in general, but specifically I was talking with someone else about Penderecki. If quite a few people, if they hear his music in isolation, it's just difficult music, but if you put his music in the context of horror, such as in The Shining, people just respond to it. It makes sense. So it's really about those soundtracks and how incredibly intricate and advanced they were, and using all these very avant-garde elements such as musique concrète and drone, dissonance, free jazz. But in the context of horror, it's just incredible. And I think the Italian giallo genre, and also the Italian horror genre in general, or Italian Gothic, it's just, I haven't seen that anywhere else in the world in terms of that attention to detail and atmosphere. And for me, I can take or leave the horror, I can take or leave the plot, but what I get out of those films is it's just overwhelming atmosphere and just kind of sensory overload. If you watch Suspiria, it's just pure, just rock and roll the way it works, and it just blows my mind. So I guess it was a tribute to that, but at the same time exploring the idea of extreme horror versus extreme pantomime. When you have grown men smashing vegetables, and this is what people do every day. These guys must be doing for 20 years or whatever. So this is kind of jaded quality I really responded to. But in terms of the way that the horror was portrayed in the film, I guess I was interested in some directors who try to defend what they're doing by using some kind of moral argument, and that is why I have an issue. Because if you look at directors such as Fulci or Argento, Bava, it was entertainment. That's what it was. But they never felt the need to defend it. But as soon as you get directors, quite often, it's not even in horror, just directors who made very violent films, they'll often say, I just wanted to, it's the usual excuse, I wanted to show how terrible it is. But I just don't buy that. You're not. You're trying to entertain an audience, you're trying to sensationalize violence, and that's the argument. No matter how serious you are as a filmmaker, you can't control how your audience is going to interpret your images. So I think part of it was satirizing that, and also I think we didn't show any violence in the film, but we still can't control how an audience interprets the sound of what we've done. I think it's almost impossible, and some of the most disturbing stuff I can think of is actually in music. If you listen to Great White Death by Whitehouse, it's far more disturbing than watching a video nasty or something like that. So I think part of it is just showing how incredibly manipulative sound can be, much more than image, because obviously your brain is compensating for what you don't see.
Right. I think you did a really good job with that, especially with where you're showing like the vegetables, and then there's like overlapping, just like people screaming and all kinds of just horrifying ambient sounds, but you're just juxtaposing with these just regular old vegetables.
Yeah, I guess we wanted to make something quite innocent visually. So again, when I wrote the script, it was just very it was very set out from the beginning. Just no blood, no murder, none of that really. But still trying to trace those highs and lows of a horror film and those intensities. And I was just curious to see how an audience would react to quite innocent, quite humorous images, I guess, and incredibly disturbing sounds and descriptions, really.
Is that kind of like, I was going to ask you about Gilderoy is kind of, I mean, he's foreign in every sense of the way, in the word. He's from a different place, he doesn't know the language, he's not familiar with the style of movie making. Is that why pretty much you made him like that, or?
Yeah, but also you can find links between these two worlds. I mean, when I think of the world he comes from, which is this kind of the garden shed eccentric, you could go back to Trevor Wishart, Basil Kirchin, Vernon Elliott, even if they didn't use garden sheds, the music they were making compared to the music made in Italy, for me there was a link in terms of this psychedelic aspect, this sense of wonder and mystery, so that they have something in common. And the more I wrote the script, the more I realised that there were links that I hadn't even thought about, such as, you know, the Dorking chicken, which is the symbol of Dorking. But that chicken comes from Milan, which I thought was fantastic. It really made my day, the whole thing. And then that goes into the poultry tunnel in Santini's film, which references to Death Laid an Egg. And the soundtrack to that was made by Bruno Maderna, who was working with Luciano Berio, Kathy Berberian. And the whole film kind of came from this Berberian track called Visage, which is not the band, but it's this 17, 20-minute piece of howling, which is this kind of avant-garde classic. But I just thought, wow, this could really work in a horror film. And again, it was just about context, really. And conversely, I mentioned this quite a bit, but also the Texas Chainsaw Massacre soundtrack. If you put it in a concert hall without the context of a film, it's just phenomenal musique concrète. It's so powerful. So I mean, it's just all about culture, really. I guess high up people tend to dismiss horror soundtracks because of the association of horror, and I guess people who don't like high art music dismiss that music unless it's in a horror film. So I guess Berberian is just kind of jumbling those things up in some way.
For your pick for Toby Jones, did you have him in mind when you were writing the script, or did you just kind of fall upon him?
No, the person I had in mind was Adam Bowman. He's a friend of mine, and I released his music. I have a small record label, which I'm not going to promote, but anyway. So I almost fell into that self-promotion thing. But so he, I don't know, with great respect to Adam, he just inhabited this character that I needed for the film. And again, with the absolute greatest respect to Adam, he's not an actor, and I think it's a very tough role to pull off, because you need to be so engaging as a lead character, but at the same time the script dictates that you should be nondescript and very still. So how to convey that turmoil he's going through by remaining still and quiet, you need someone who's very experienced and very talented. So you call Toby Jones, of course. So it was great. You know, he responded he responded very well to the script. He has that experience that he can do what is needed without me having to explain it, because I can't say to an actor how to move their face. It's down to him, really. So he was really good. He had a little chart in his dressing room about the emotional highs and lows. I mean, for him as an actor, he can only respond to concrete elements, because there are these abstract reveries within the film, but actors, well, for him anyway. So he needed very concrete emotional responses to things.
How you ended up working with Chris Dickens and Nick Nolan, the editor and the cinematographer. I know Dickens worked with like Edgar Wright and worked on Slipknot, Millionaire. How did you come to know those guys?
Mary, who produced Berberian, she suggested Chris because he edited one of her films. He did Submarine. So we sent him a script. He responded to it. So we got together really, and I really enjoyed it. It was. I was a little bit apprehensive at the beginning because I think the films he's done are very different, but that you realise, what's great about him is he adapts himself to the climate of each film he's working on. So he had no problem whatsoever going slowly, no problem whatsoever, just absolutely fine. No arguments whatsoever about that. I mean, what we argued about was the structure of the film, because I wrote the script as a 5-act or 5-reel structure, that each section was as long as one reel, which would be around 20 minutes. But the whole irony about that is back in the 70s, each reel was 10 minutes. So he felt it didn't flow so well to have these intertitles, stop to black, reel 1, carry on, and then 2, 3, 4, 5. He thought it took you too much outside the film. He thought there was enough of that going on with some of the interplay with the sound and so on. So he suggested that we just do it as a straight cut in terms of everything flowing. I said no. He said yes. It kept going on like this for a while. I can't watch an editor cut things that I don't really like. So I'm going to go away for a week. And I came back and I have to say he was right. It worked. It did work. I mean, part of me misses the real structure, but I guess it was just kind of. Maybe I watched too much Guy Sherman in my life, but it worked, and so apart from that one disagreement where I conceded it did work, I think we were on the same page really. I mean, when you work with an editor, so much of it is intuitive. We didn't talk that much. It's just trial and error. We sit there for 3 months. We just try things out. Try this, doesn't work. You try that. So it's quite hard to explain afterwards. What did you do all day? I was trying to think through it really, but he got the references. You can mention some filmmaker from Eastern Europe and he'll get that, he'll understand it, or you'll show him things. So and he's very very good at sound, because I'm working with one editor, not on Continent Lager, but he didn't really. The sound is essentially someone else's department, so you don't have to put the sound in. So, you can leave air pockets or sonic air pockets, but there's just no sound, and someone fills it in later. But Chris is, but so that kind of works against the film, especially Berberian, where the sound dictates the flow of the images and vice versa. It's a constant back and forth. So Chris was working back and forth a lot with James Cargill from Broadcast. James would send in MP3s, so that would dictate the length of a shot, but sometimes the shot would dictate the length of the music and so on. So it was back and forth a lot, and this is quite a hard film to lock picture on, because ideally we would want to go back and forth within the sound mix, but it became just too expensive to do that. So eventually we had to lock off, which just kind of broke my heart a little bit. But no, I mean, I enjoyed it a lot. I think it's hard when you work with one person in a room. You're just terrified. Are you going to get on or not? It's always. But luckily it was good. So I think we're going to do another film together, which is great. Nick, I saw Institute Benjaminta, the Quay brothers film, which I thought the cinematography was just phenomenal, and the way he'd use objects in the foreground and the whole thing, I was just blown away by it. So I was amazed when he accepted to do the film with us, and he's very good with lighting as well. He knows his lights inside out.
Yes.
And he'll take his time to get it right. You try to rush him, he won't have any of it. He's got to get the lighting just right, and it pays off in the end. But yeah, and I was expecting someone quite serious, but he's he's full of jokes on set, which kind of lightens the mood, because I think on set I find it quite stressful, the clock's ticking and so on. And yeah, no, I mean, he's got so much experience, and it really helped, because I'm really bad at eye lines, and Nick is an expert with all that, in terms of I can do maybe 2 characters of eye lines, but when he gets to a group, it just does my head in. So it was. What was interesting with Nick was we used the Alexa camera. We found somewhat perverse, given that it's a film all about analog, but we like that perversity. And I think what was interesting about that period in Italian cinema was those filmmakers were always trying to use whatever was new. It was always about, just so. And it was great, the Alexa. I mean, because we had done some tests on other digital formats, and you always felt it wasn't quite there, especially with the skin tones. Everything was a little bit synthetic. You had this kind of pasty quality on the cheeks, especially if you're doing close-ups of actors' faces. But the Alexa, I have to say, because they told me it's HD resolution, because the red is 4K resolution. But Ari did something to the color calibration which really makes it so much more organic looking. So I have to say, I never thought I'd see the day when I saw, when there'd be a camera that is almost as good as 35mm, and it's not quite there with 35mm, but I mean, given the budget restraints, we could not have done this film with 35mm. Just wouldn't have happened. It was quite a low budget. So, the Alexa did save us, definitely.
Well, it looks great.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
But, I guess that's it. We'll wrap it up.
That's
Thank
it.
you so
Party's
much.
over. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.